And we are live.
Great. Thank you. And I'd like to call this March 24th, 2023 meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government to order. And the first order of business is to confirm a quorum.
Yes, there's a quorum present both in New York and in our offices in Albany. In addition, Commissioner Carney is participating remotely pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, and the Commission's resolution and rules and procedures for remote participation in extraordinary circumstances. And I believe Commissioner James will be joining us in that way as well.
I think Commissioner James is here. I see him on the screen.
Okay.
Right. All right. So we do have a quorum. Can we turn to the approval of the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th, 2023?
I have a change on it.
Right. So I heard, I think, Commissioner Cardoza, and then seconded by Commissioner Groenewegen.
We have a
Are there
proposed,
any changes?
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Carballo.
Yes. So on the motion that was made regarding the 94 4F compensation of the commissioners, I just noted that the part about the approval of the timesheets was not part of that motion. I do not, if we could change that word approved to reviewed, I would be okay with that change. But I'm just technically speaking, it was not part of the motion.
Which page is that on, Commissioner?
Page 10. So if we could change the word approved to reviewed, I think that would be okay. If you guys want to do that.
What is it?
Yeah.
Only the timesheet should be reviewed instead of approved.
Approved between approved and reviewed. I don't think it should be subject to. But if we put in reviewed is, if you want to go over it and discuss it, I think that's okay. I think that I to the one. Yes, Sam going. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yes.
I don't know that I agree with that.
That's okay.
In terms of, I just think that it would be more appropriate.
So I think that, commissioners, I think I'm going to ask if we can get a legal opinion on this. So I'm going to ask that we defer this, that we move this to executive session and take it up in executive session, if there are no objections.
No.
May I suggest that may I suggest that the minutes are accurate as they're written and we approve them, but if there's a motion to amend the underlying resolution, we deal with that in executive session.
I don't think they're.
We can do that.
I think they're
So there is
accurate.
a motion. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I should wait to be recognized. I said, I don't believe they're
Carvalho.
accurate. And that was my, that's why I was discussing it. I don't believe they're accurate. So if we could discuss it in executive session, that would be great. And then come back to it with.
Okay. All right. We'll, if there are no objections, we'll just table the approval of the minutes until after the executive session. Any objections to that?
No.
Okay. All righty. So we'll move on then to report from staff, starting with the operations update.
Yes, thank you. The operations update is under tab B in your agenda books. And again, as in recent months, in addition to the comparisons of staff activity in each of the categories of the prior year to date, we have comparisons to the corresponding monthly period in 2022. or 23 in this case. So we're comparing the February numbers to the January numbers, as well as having the current monthly count, the year-to-date count, and the corresponding 2022 year-to-date count. That is January and February in each of these categories. And as in previous reports, as we rebuild staff, our numbers will improve. Some of the comparisons will show lesser activity, and that's simply the product, in most instances, of staff rebuilding taking place. We're making good progress on that. I'll talk about that a little bit more after we complete this report. But if there are any questions, staff is happy to respond.
Okay.
Commissioner Cardoza?
I just wonder if you could address.
Michael, did you have a question? Commissioner Cardoza?
Yes. I just wondered, Sandy, if you could address a little bit more where there's a dramatic difference. For example, under investigations, there's one matter opened in 23 compared to 35 opened in prior year. Is this all explained by the staff transition and the lack of staff?
Precisely, particularly in investigations. As I've previously said, we have extended offers and we have accepted offers for Director of Investigations and Deputy Director of Investigations. We're simply waiting for approval from DOB, Division of Budget, so that we can finalize those hirings. Once those two positions are filled, we have identified a number of candidates for the remaining open positions in the investigations and enforcement group, which include investigative counsel both in Albany and New York, a senior investigator position, and an additional investigator position. So we have posted for all of those positions. We've conducted interviews, and we're just waiting for the new incumbents to come on board after we have DOB approval to fill those remaining positions. But that is affecting our ability to see a number of previously opened investigations through. And the open refers to the procedure that existed under the prior agency for formal opening of investigations.
And is the discrepancy on training number of employees overdue for ethics training? Is that because of our shortage or because the agencies are not yet up to speed on providing their employees to be trained? On page 5.
The numbers in our report reflect only the trainings that we're conducting. We are, as we're required to do by the statute, collecting data from the many other agencies, the 296 other agencies on their training activities. We're collecting them on a monthly basis and reporting them on a quarterly basis to the governor and to the legislative leadership. We are expanding. In fact, we have now posted for additional positions within our own training unit. And our plan, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail when we get to the staffing plan on the agenda. Our plan calls for at least tripling the number of trainers that we currently have in-house, and possibly going from 3 to 4 in the proposed plan, and adding training assistants as well in that unit. So we have substantial expansion plans. We did not conduct as many trainings in February as in previous months because of a vacancy and vacations. But our plan going forward is to substantially increase the number of trainings we do. Still, those are going to be small in comparison to the overall mandate of the statute, which calls for training hundreds of thousands of state employees ultimately.
And the vacancies on the staff level, maybe this is the next topic, you said to have offers out. So are you confident that within the next month or so we'll be able to have filled these vacant positions, high-level vacancy positions, or are we still going to have a problem?
Are we talking about investigations in the high-level positions, or?
Why don't you just do a staffing update? We can see where we are. I think on investigations and the chief of investigations and the deputy, you said you've already made offers. The
We have
offers are out and accepted.
We've extended offers. Those offers have been accepted.
Right.
We've done everything we do at this stage internally. We have now submitted the appropriate documentation to the Division of Budget, and we're just awaiting their approval so that we can put these individuals on the payroll. And I am anticipating that we will have both of the new incumbents in place in April.
Great.
And then, as I said, we have already interviewed, pre-screened, if you will, candidates, eligible candidates for investigative counsel in both Albany and New York, and for investigators in both Albany and New York. And we're just waiting for the new leadership in the division to come in to make the final decisions on those. So we feel we're in a position to move quickly once we have the necessary budgetary approvals, which we anticipate having shortly.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Any more, Nancy? Commissioner Groenewegen.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's easier than Groenewegen.
Right.
I had one question on the Public Information Office report, and it's more a question about headings. We have a heading in the second line of records provided, and I was just curious, is that actual records provided, or is that responses to requests? Do you understand the difference? We've got 13 requests have been made for January, and then it'll say records provided. I assume that doesn't mean we provided.
On page 4.
On page 7 of 7.
Page 7 of 7?
You're looking at
Record
looking at the
access
January
requests.
and
Well, it doesn't matter which month.
February,
It's really
it's
it's the heading of records provided.
I believe it's the number, Michael Sand.
With Public Information Office.
I believe that's the number of requests that were responded to with documents, not the actual number of documents.
That's exactly
Okay,
the one.
got it.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. All right.
Any other questions on the operations report?
I do. I'm looking at page 6, and we're doing audit and review. There's a stark difference in terms of, and I know we spoke about this a little random FDS reviews. What I've noticed is that it appears under COLIC, we have a lot more targeted FDS reviews versus random reviews. So from January to February, there's 0 random review, but 127 that was targeted. Under J-code, it's the opposite. They have 1 targeted and 146 random. Are we moving away from random audits and going to more target reviews? And is there a reason for that?
The short answer is no. There's no, we're not moving from one to the other. Both the targeted reviews and the random reviews occur every year throughout the year. It's just the specific timing of either of those 2 sets of reviews changes. So
does that mean for March, April, we might expect to see more random reviews?
correct. Once the targeted reviews are complete by staff here, which I also had is quite understaffed, but once the targeted reviews are complete, then the staff will move on to random reviews. Again, it's a rather fluid timing of each of those two sets of reviews, but there's no change from, or emphasis or priority with respect to one type of review over another.
And you should know, as we discussed last time, with respect to the random reviews, those are done on a quarterly, they're drawn on a quarterly basis. And in some instances, they're completed more promptly during the quarter. And in other instances, they take longer to complete. So the entire draw could conceivably be completed in the first month after the quarterly draw, and then you're not going to see the activity. And the number should be 85 in the year-to-date column under COLIG. It's not including the 85 random FDS reviews that were completed. If I have that correctly, maybe I'm,
No,
withdraw
it's-
that.
Yes,
No,
Okay.
that's it.
Any other, Lynn, Commissioner?
There's another thing on page 7, is there a list of the, I'm sorry? Is there a list of the records that we've denied for review? So we have a list, because it's not here. Do we have that list available?
yeah, we do maintain a log of the FDS requests received and of our responses to them.
Let's see.
So we don't maintain a list, but we could draw that data from our log.
But that log won't give you information on the reason why.
Probably not. But we have we save the emails that we send out with our responses, so we could always look at that.
Okay, so we might just put that together. I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
With regard to the training on page 5 of 7, the numbers are really dramatic compared to the numbers that we see for Jacob in the similar period. It would seem to me that that may be something that Emily should be picking up on and trumpeting a bit, that we are taking the mandate of training seriously, and our numbers are showing great success, even in the early stages.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Yep. Anything else on the operations update? All right. Seeing no hands raised, can we move now to the staffing and recruiting update?
Yes. Again, we are proceeding with our efforts to complete out the interim staffing plan, as I said, in the investigations unit. We have accepted offers for director and deputy director of the division, and we have identified suitable candidates, qualified candidates, for the remaining open positions in the unit, which include investigative counsel and investigators. In the ethics division, we are in the process of negotiating to fill one remaining position. We're hoping to close that out shortly. We are continuing our recruiting efforts to fill a remaining position in the lobbying unit. And in the training unit, we have postings out now for additional training associates, trainers, and training assistants in that unit. And those will account for the remaining open positions under the interim staffing plan, and also anticipate moving forward with the expanded staffing plan, which we'll talk about in a minute or two.
Questions? Here? New York?
Okay.
Syracuse or Long Island?
Here.
All good, okay. All right, so can we move then to the budget update?
Yes, the budget update is under tab C in your agenda books. We are moving along essentially as predicted previously. We are now anticipating closing out the year with a surplus of a little over $1 million, 1.1114. We have been able to use some of the surplus, prior surplus, for expenses that we are incurring with respect to an expanded tracking and scheduling system for the new expanded training requirement that we have on the ethics side, as well as anticipated projects that remain to be completed with respect to the lobbying application. So those are positive developments, and we are moving forward with those projects in sequence. But other than that, we are on track. Again, as I've said before, there had been a surplus, a larger surplus on the personal services side. We were in the opposite position on non-personal services. We've been able to transfer the funds around, so we're going to be completing the year still in the green.
Great. Questions? Commissioner James.
I just,
We'll hear from Commissioner James first, and then we'll come to New York. Commissioner James.
I think it would be helpful if each month we could get the budgeted amount and the actual, so we have comparing the actual versus the budget in each category.
We have, I think we have, yeah, I mean, the appropriations are shown at the top. You'll see that we began the year with an appropriation for personal services of just about $6.5 million, and for non-personal services, 1.4 million. So the
Okay.
total was 7.881.
Okay, got it.
Okay, New York?
Thank you. I'm actually just looking back, and something stood out to me under the second quarter, non-personal services supply. So first quarter, we had just over under $9,000, and then we pretty much almost quadrupled that in the second quarter for supplies at $33,161. It's just something that stood out, and I don't know what we did then, if you recall.
I don't unfortunately have the specifics with me, and Mariana is unable to attend today because of a personal emergency. But I can get you the detail. There have been additional supplies and equipment purchased. Among other things, I don't know that they fall within the supplies category. We're replacing outdated computer equipment, workstations, both in New York and in Albany. So there are expenses associated with that, and that project hopefully will be completed by next week, so within this fiscal year. But I'll circulate additional detail after the meeting.
Other questions from New York City? All right. Any here? No? All right. We're ready to move on then to the budget status for the next fiscal year.
Yes, thank you. As previously reported, the governor's executive budget proposal granted our request in full with an additional $193,000 for contingencies. I'm happy to report that both chambers of the legislature in their one-house bills have concurred with those budgetary amounts. So that's very positive news, and that carries with it the governor's agreement with our proposed expanded staffing plan going from 49 full-time equivalents, from 47 full-time equivalents to 68 full-time equivalents.
Right.
So we're just waiting now for the finalization of the budget.
Excellent.
The only difference between the one House bills is that the Assembly's version does not include, they did not concur in the Article 7 proposal with respect to staggered terms on the commission.
And
So we're going to have to wait and see how that
Right.
develops.
And for those who are not clear about what that is, I'm going to try to clear it up. And if I don't, somebody will clear up what I'm trying to say. But I think what it means is that the speaker's communication about the terms of the speaker's appointees is actually what he has communicated is actually the reverse of what's in the legislation. So we've got to they've got to align what the speaker has communicated in his letter with what the legislation align the legislation with the speaker's letter, essentially. And so there's a mechanism for doing that, as I understand it, by simply allowing the appointer to determine the terms for their appointees within the statute. So, in other words, because we are, and this is a one-time thing, because we are a new commission, some commissioners will have 2-year terms, some commissioners will have 4-year terms. The way the speaker's letter reads is that the appointees who have those terms are reversed from what the legislation says. So the easiest way to clean it up is to just allow the appointer to determine those terms. It's a one-time thing. Actually, the people who are appointed for 2-year terms, as I understand it, have the opportunity to serve longer than those of us who are appointed for 4-year terms. Because not only can those people serve those 2-year terms, but they then can complete 2 more 4-year terms. So it's just clearing up the speaker's aspect of the appointments process. Sure.
Chair.
Yes.
How do we know whether do we not know currently? My one letter didn't say how long my term was. Do we know what our terms are now, or is that what this legislation is designed to figure out?
I knew at the beginning.
The question was, yeah, we did your letter, was that Commissioner Ayers
Yes.
who asked the question? Yeah, did your letter not include a outline or statement about the term of your service?
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was looking at my nomination letter. My confirmation letter says it's a 4-year term unless otherwise provided by statute.
Right.
So that's.
And we all got that. It's just in the case of the speaker's appointees, there are questions, and it's that's what has to be resolved, and that's what's being worked on.
And in addition, there was an oversight in the original version of the statute at 94-4A, which added up to only 9 commissioners in the allocation of terms. So this brings the number up to 11 as well.
Sure.
See, okay, great. Thanks.
You're here for 4 years whether you want to or not.
Right. All right. Are we okay here? All right. So we are done with the budget status. We can move into reports of committees. I just want to say that not all committees need to report today, and that will be the case in every meeting. Committee chairs will only report out if they need to. So I know that we have a report from the administration committee, and then I'll look for a show of hands to see if there are reports from any of the other committees. So I'll start with Commissioner Groenewegen.
Thank you. reporting out from our first meeting of the admin committee, there was a discussion we had about the draft charter that had been circulated to all members in advance, and I believe it was circulated to all commission members, just as a courtesy. The discussion was very productive. One of the things that was noted by Commissioner Cardozo was that we hadn't assigned any kind of oversight function to examining the agency's technology needs, which we know are significant and are being addressed. But the thinking was to have some mechanism for each of the various committees on their own initiative, understanding the technology needs of any program area. But to the extent there was value to be had in coordinating that, the thinking was that that would become a function of the admin committee. So the draft charter has been amended, and I will circulate that to everyone afterwards, to add in the scope of authority to state that the admin committee's authority extends to oversights of matters relating to colleagues' financial operations, personnel matters, added now technology matters, and internal controls. There were also two other discussions as to the scope of the committee's responsibilities. There had been a proposal that this committee be involved in the review of the commissioner's handbook, but at the chair's suggestion and with the agreement of the committee, it was decided that that would be removed for now, as was a recommendation that the admin committee be responsible for monitoring the implementation of the resolution on committees. And so those two proposed responsibilities have been removed, and with that, the charter was not further amended. The one thing I would note is that Commissioner Cardozo had also suggested that a specific point about consideration of the agency's personnel policies and practices, this is a suggestion he made after the fact, was that we consider the value of enacting a policy of conducting exit interviews for staff. It's my understanding that such a policy doesn't currently exist, and there's a belief among some of us that that could be a useful means of assessing staff morale and understanding if exiting staff have any good suggestions for improving the operations of the agency. So that was something that has been suggested as a future item for the body.
Great, thank you. So that's information only, there's no action needed here on the part of the commission?
There is not.
Okay.
Other than, I guess I do have a question. There will be a document from this committee that is the formal charge for the body. My understanding is that that charge will then be approved by the entire commission,
Okay.
correct? I'm just trying to,
It's up to the commission. But
my thinking would be, I think it's, while each committee may decide its scope of authority as a preliminary matter, I think there's value in having the entire body affirm that understanding and have it reflect the decision of the entire body, not just a subset. So my recommendation would be that the charters, when adopted, be approved by the entire
commission. So are we clear on Commissioner Groenwegen's recommendation that when each committee has decided on its charter of responsibilities, that we bring that back to the commission for an approval by the entire commission?
Now it's in New York.
Well, yeah, that's good. I can see. That's great. And so we will take that as direction. There are no objections to it. Be recorded in the minutes that as those charters are completed, they'll come back for approval of the full commission.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to do a committee report? Commissioner Cardozo.
Just on behalf, excuse me, of the Communications Committee, I just want to convey, we had some thoughts with respect to the public meeting, and we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. But I also wanted to note that Emily DeSantis, our new communications director, has jumped in enthusiastically. I've spoken to her a couple of times, and she's developing a new communications policy. So that I think at the moment, there's not an urgency for the Communications Committee to be dealing with most of the issues on our mandate, because obviously the Emily needs some time to evaluate and learn what's going on. And she also has 2 staff vacancies. There may be some questions with respect to the FOIL issues, which we have to get into, but there's nothing of pressing urgency vis-a-vis that, because I think Emily needs a little time. And then we'll, of course, be meeting with her on a regular basis. Just want to report that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Cardozo or Emily, or anything else related to the Communications Committee? All right. Hearing none, any other committees wanting to report out at this time? If so, just raise a hand.
All right, if I may. The special committee has received some response with regard to what other states are doing with respect to delegation and the like, and we're going to be exploring that. We have a couple of proposals that have come through the members of the committee, and some ideas as to how we're going to pursue them. We're also going to be figuring out the project of reviewing the regulations of the commission, which is a mandate of the legislation, and we'll have that done by Thursday. No, we're going to be doing that as quickly as possible, and the committee's been working very hard to identify the issues that we need to address and coming up with a plan of action.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Austin and the Special Committee on Delegation and the Hogan's Law Report, etc.? Any questions for them? All right, hearing none. Any other committee reports?
Chair, just briefly, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. We hear you well.
The lobbying committee did meet on the 14th of March with the other committees, and with the assistance of the Director Carol Quinn, we did discuss improvements. These improvements we discussed in priority, and they were very briefly enhancement of the lobbying application, streamlining the registration review, and consideration on how best to utilize the staff, reviewing and updating our advisory opinions, and then improving our Section 166 forms requiring agencies to submit these forms to the commission in a more searchable format. We will report back as these improvements are accomplished, and I'd like to just note and publicly thank Director Quinn for all her hard work and assistance. Thank you.
Great. So noted. Thank you, Commissioner Carney and Director Quinn. Questions or comments for Commissioner Carney? Okay, hearing none, seeing no hands as far as I can tell. We will, are there any more committee reports? Okay, Then we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's proposed amendments to commissioner regulations, et cetera.
These are now on for permanent adoption. These are amendments to the lobbying regulations to conform to the new requirement that lobbying clients as well as lobbyists have triennial ethics training. And I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director of Lobbying, Megan Matolo, just to walk through a couple of things that we're proposing to change in these. Megan?
In the lobbying regulations, we're not proposing any changes. We're just going for adoption at this point.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
just adoption.
Yep, just adoption. As for the Freedom of Information Law regulations, from what is in your book, there's just a very few minor typographical edits that we have. So the first one is to section 900 or 937.2. A1, we revised it to ensure consistency with executive law, section 9413BI. And then at the end of that specific paragraph, there is a reference to executive law 949G, but actually that should be H. The executive law has a error in its references, so we updated that section to go to H and not G. Additionally, we changed 97.2 B2. Is there a question?
I think they're just talking among themselves.
B2, the NB provision was amended to reference the subparagraphs II rather than AA. And then another change we did was to section 937.4. We ensured that the subdivisions reflect A through D. And now subdivision C was amended to clarify that if a FOIL request was delayed, that a written response would provide the reason for the delay and the further date in which the request would be granted, denied, in whole or in part. And then any references that had a gender pronoun throughout the regulation were amended to there, or the appropriate pronoun.
So let's take these one at a time. So for the adoption of the proposed amendments to the Commission's regulations at 19 NYCRR 943 relating to ethics training for lobbyists and clients, that is a resolution that we're being asked to pass as a permanent change.
A permanent change.
All right. Are there any, Commissioner Austin?
Yes, probably a bit hyper-technical. Is Chief Administrative Officer defined anywhere? And should it be?
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Chief Administrative Officer is in the statute. And in our regulations, we define responsible party, which basically means who's responsible for submitting the filings. As we do not define CAO, but we list the Chief Administrative Officer as being responsible for the filings to be consistent with the statute, which refers to Chief Administrative Officer. But practically speaking, every filing that's submitted, it doesn't necessarily mean that the CAO of Google is the person who's listed. If an entity doesn't have a chief administrative officer, or if they want their CEO to be responsible, those are the people who end up being the CAO for the filing and being responsible for the filing. But no, we do not have a definition of what a CAO is.
It's not in the statute.
Right, and this is a category for the agency more than it is a category for the filer. It's the responsible party on the part of the filer, but it's a category we've created. Commissioner Cardozo.
But the problem we have that is when a lobbying client fills out the form, does he or she know that he then has to take the training? Does it say Chief Administrative Officer and have a blank to fill the form, say you know, who is the chief administrative? We may know who we think it is, but we need to be sure that the lobbying client who's filing this is on notice when he or she files the document. Does it say that?
Yes,
So,
yes.
in
the-
order-
the-
they
the-
would-
the-
yeah.
Well, I'll let Carol answer.
So before you can submit a filing, let alone the training, there has to be a CAO who signs and attests that they are the CAO for the filing and they're responsible for the filing. Once that's in, then the organization can submit their statement of registration, either their client report or their lobbyist report. And then with training, what happens is that the triggering event is the submission of a statement of registration. And on that, then we give notices to the people in training required roles, which really means the principal lobbyist, the individual lobbyist, the CAOs of the organizations. And then they will get a notice that says you've been identified on a statement of registration, you know, as being required to take training. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Right. Commissioner Austin.
In the final paragraph of D, the language is as applicable, will be required to. Would it be better just to say shall? Would be
I object. I object to ever using
Yeah.
shall. Shall means must or will, but not both. Nobody ever knows. So plain language authorities despise the word shall because it either means must or will.
I shall let's say must.
It's hard to say which.
I'm fine with must.
Thank you. Thank you.
But didn't you have, there were other recommended changes here? Which,
Oh, I do. I have a lot, but
I don't think we should adopt something permanent.
Yeah, I would recommend that we hold off on copy editing of that sort until we get to this overall review that's being recommended by Commissioner Ayers as well as our executive director. Commissioner Ayers, you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I was going to say something similar. I'm grateful for the opportunity to submit suggestions on these proposals beforehand, but I didn't intend them to be to prompt a global review between Wednesday and today. My thought is we have the statutory task of doing a comprehensive review of our regulations. I thought it would be share with the group sort of where I'm coming from in terms of my own views about language. And I think that the discussion we just had about chief administrative officer illustrates the importance of that. That you know, I think one shouldn't have to go through the process to be able to read the regs and understand any given reg where one starts. And so I'm really interested in looking for ways to make that easier for the folks we serve. But I'm also I don't think that doing that piecemeal or in an ad hoc way makes sense. And so I'm very happy to pass, you know, what's been proposed and to look at that later on the understanding that I do think it's really important for our constituency that we be as comprehensive as possible and that may mean some sort of changes in house style or the way we post things on the internet, the way we organize. You know, as a new member of this commission, I found it really challenging to get into our regulatory scheme and understand what it means. And, you know, I'm not the most brilliant person in the world, but I'm a law professor and many of our constituents aren't. So I think that's important, but I also don't want to delay the process. So I'll even vote for things that have shall in them. Despite my philosophy. I'm going to swallow pursuant to
I'll vote for it.
all of these legalisms. Yeah, so thanks. I just wanted to, and Sandy and I had a conversation about that beforehand, so thanks to Sandy as well.
Yes.
just a quick question.
Commissioner Whittingham.
Thank you. Just a quick question. In differing them, it might be this. So these are just two, right? We may come with, like the last meeting we probably had with 4 or 5. We might come up with another 4 or 5 next month. And so we continue with the same language and then we differ for a comprehensive review, and so we are repeating a whole lot of things. So I'm just troubled by us, like, why do we see the issue and say, leave it to the wayside, although we're adopting something permanently, and we're gonna have more of these next month. For the few meetings I've been at, we've had a couple of them, and so we're just gonna do it over. So, I'm not quite sure, I understand, do it in one sweep, but there's a whole lot that we need to do, and if we're recognizing issues now, why just put it down, kick the ball down the field? That's what we're doing.
So you're suggesting that we correct this?
Yes, because then we're gonna have to come back to these. We had about 5 of them the last meeting. We're gonna have more the next
I
meeting.
think that, yeah, Commissioner Whittingham, I think the challenge there is that we will get into copy editing during the meetings. And I think we might be able to avoid that if we continue the practices is, and then I think Commissioner Austin's, Vice Chair Austin's committee is going to take up the process for this comprehensive review. And maybe we need to get a report at either the next meeting or the following as to how that's going to happen. And then we'll.
It's not a committee, is it?
Review of the bylaw, not the.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, and then and then once we have a process for how we're going to do this comprehensive review, maybe we set a day aside where we have a special meeting that focuses nothing but regs. That'll be totally exciting. I can't wait. But that may be what we have to do. I think otherwise we're going to start copy editing in every meeting, and it could get us really bogged down. Commissioner Carvalho.
Is there any time frame on adopting these permanently right now?
Yeah, I think we need to adopt. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carol.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
You can
know
have
more
a
about
year.
this than I
You
do.
you can have up to a year from the date you propose a regulation to get it permanently adopted, but we would have to continuously do the emergency adoptions because these have been in effect since December because the training requirement was going into place on January 18th. The current regulations would not be accurate because the current regulations refer to the old 94 and the old Lobbying Act. Actually, 94 did not have, this is new, the client training requirement. So the current regulations without these changes only discuss training for lobbyists because that is what is in the Lobbying Act. So with the NYCRR, we had to now train clients, which is why we can't leave the regulations alone because that would be inaccurate. It would only apply to lobbyists. So we were trying to get these through, and these are in effect. The training has already launched. So we could keep doing emergency adoptions. Of course, our preference is to have these permanently adopted.
Yeah, and it seems to me that it's better practice to have, since the changes we're talking about seem to be more stylistic than substantive at this point, because the law is the law, and we're just bringing our regs in alignment with the law. It's better practice, more effective practice to go ahead and have permanent regs where we can, and then we can make the stylistic changes without changing the substance of the permanent regs.
Yeah.
I agree that we should have some of them, but in putting out any regulation, we should have clarity. Style and clarity sometimes are very different. Sometimes because of the style, it might be clearer, but there are things that they're really not clarity. And you read a statute and you reread it 2 or 3 times to get the message. I'm fine with us going forward with these 2, but I think if we're going another 2, 3 meetings, we're having a problem. I love the idea of Regs Day, but with so many regs, I don't know how many of them, Chair Davy, I don't know how many of them we're gonna get through. It's a great idea, but we gotta just do it sooner rather than later, that's all.
Sure. Commissioner Ayers.
So one suggestion in terms of our process, I mean, I think, I wonder if we could talk now about the comprehensive review and how, just to, is there clarity? I know Commissioner said that the special committee will be, look, sorry, I'm a little distracted because I just saw myself raising my hand on my colleague's computer screen. I got hit with delays. It's a weird experience.
They're not in sync.
Yeah.
Sorry, my question was, if the task of the special committee is to come back with a proposal for how that comprehensive review is going to work, I mean, number one, if that's the group's understanding, I think that's helpful to know. And number two, I also think that just as was said, my suggestions were intended to be to not make substantive changes in the regs, but to make the law more accessible and comprehensible. We could come back with a proposal, which I'd be happy to write, as you can probably tell from my email, with a proposal for some sort of guidelines for how things would work best, so that we don't. I take the point about we don't want to be doing line editing in a meeting. That's not helpful. That's not going to produce good regulations. But I think that we can, if we can all agree on some guidelines, then we can work together. And certainly, the talented staff members who are working on drafting these regs can, take guidance from the commission at that larger level rather than, having a whole bunch of line editing every time we all get together. And there's something that we can't understand. So in other words, I'm suggesting maybe the process could be simplified. We still have to do a comprehensive review, but I don't think that should mean that, those of us on the special committee sit around and redraft our entire 100-page regulatory structure. Like, that's not a great, because it won't get results by the time we need them. So we can think about the process, but my first suggestion would be maybe we work on developing some general guidelines that we can all agree on, and then that will make them easier to implement.
So Commissioner Edwards.
Do you see that as a function of the commission, commissioners or the staff?
Well, the drafting the regulations, certainly the staff. I think giving guidelines in advance on what kind of regulations we'll approve is a function of the commission to say, we want them to be clear, we want them to be transparent.
So giving guidelines to the staff on the commission.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, because I don't want to be
right. It's on yourself.
Yeah.
I don't want to set a precedent where we can down so deeply.
Exactly.
Staff work.
No, we're not the
drafters. In support of.
Commissioner Cardozo.
I do think it's important that the special committee that Len is heading on delegation issues off of the Hogan Lovells report, they have a lot of substantive issues to deal with, which is very different in reviewing all our regulations of significant magnitude for clarity. So I think, to say that the special committee is going to be doing all this is incorrect, because it's my understanding special committees can be focusing on the delegation issues, which are very significant and substantive, which is different than many of the other issues.
Right. So then where's the,
Commissioner Ayers and then Commissioner Groenewegen.
Thank you. So then I guess my question is, where is the appropriate place to have the conversation about, I think like we were talking before, my overarching test would be a non-lawyer who's not an expert should be able to read our regs themselves and understand them. And I'd like to, and I think it's appropriate for us as a commission to adopt that principle. And then, that way when staff is drafting regulations and sharing with us, they have a guideline for what is it that we are going to approve. Where's the right place to have that conversation? If it's not, what's the right context for that?
Yeah, I think it should be the special committee comes out with a recommendation to the full commission that we set parameters guidelines with regard to what we want to achieve with, coming up with more transparent and liberal guidelines. That's open to that's appealing to the public. It should come from there. We adopt them. That's one thing I understand, some Christian regulations.
No, I,
Commissioner Groenwegen and then Commissioner Carvalho.
I wanted to echo Commissioner Ayer's comment that the task of drafting regulations in the first instance, I think clearly is a staff obligation. That's what they exist for. They have the expertise to do it. They're the ones that are going to be administering. So I think it's important that we all recognize that. Insofar as I think there's been a general consensus that any regulation benefits from clear, simplified writing with, shalls and musts being sorted out. If you look at the markup that Commissioner Ayers took the time to create, if you look in the comments section of where she explains what she's doing, you can discern that the key rules of principles of construction she thinks are important. She's taken that multi-page guide that the federal government uses and put together and applied it as appropriate, at least as she thinks appropriate, to these regs. So we already have, thanks to the work she did, a starting point for identifying those key regulation drafting suggestions that she thinks are applicable. And to the extent that would be a useful document for the commission to just come to a consensus on and get to staff as quickly as possible makes sense. And I think, again, the way I would see it, it's a task. I don't think it has to go to a committee. I think if one of us as a member of the commission wants to take that on, I think that makes good sense. It can be done efficiently. If the work product, like as Commissioner Ayers has, needs specific comment, then we could comment on it. But I think it makes good sense to first have a commission member who is willing to undertake that task to do it. It would be the ideal practices for writing good regs. It wouldn't be long, it would be a list, and it would be something staff would have to work from. I think that would be very beneficial and easy to accomplish.
So let me try a couple of suggestions. The first one would be just that we ask Commissioner Ayers, since she's already started out on this journey, to think about a set of guiding principles for how we do plain language drafting of our documents. I'll just do it that broadly. And bring that back to the commission for conversation and review. Should we adopt that before we get to a comprehensive review of everything on that regs day or week or month or whatever it's going to be, should we adopt the guidelines that Commissioner Ayers brings back for our review, then we will ask staff as they begin to bring more regs to us for adoption, that they take into consideration those guidelines, to Commissioner Whittingham's point. So that would be the first recommendation. I don't think we need a motion for that. I think we just need to reflect it in the minutes, that there's no objection to that approach. So that'll be number one, to get a set of guidelines that we will discuss and agree upon. Number two would be that Commissioner Austin, since he already has this committee and there's been some discussion, along with Commissioner Cardozo, talk about a process for reg review and then come back to us with a recommendation. Because I think some of us were under the impression that it might fall under that special committee. I think others had opinions about it. So come back to us at the next meeting with a recommendation on how we do this comprehensive reg review, which I think the statute requires, is that right?
It does.
Which the statute requires. So that would be the second. Right. Now, the third is that the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the permanent regulation on related to ethics training with the understanding that we will look at stylistic changes to that at a later date. So is there such a motion?
I'm so moved.
Commissioner Groenwegen, and I see a second by Commissioner Ayers.
We were on for with respect to the
This
training
permanent
reg,
adoption.
it's permanent at this time.
Right.
We've already
Yes,
completed the period.
exactly.
And I believe we've had no comments.
No comments.
Okay,
No
so this
Correct,
is
no
permanent
comments.
adoption, right, of the ethics training for lobbyists and clients regulation. Are there any more questions or comments on that? All right, all those in favor of approving this permanent regulation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, please say no. So the ayes have it, I think it's approved unanimously. All right, secondly, we have now under number 6 on the agenda, this proposed Freedom of Information Law regulation that we are doing an emergency adoption for.
That's correct. And there are some corrections.
Which you went through.
What I went through already.
Yeah,
Which you
they're
have.
kind of like, so the cleanup,
Yeah, very, yeah,
very
typographical.
technical. Yeah, cleanup typographical type things. Commissioner Cardoza.
With respect to this proposed regulation, there's no indication of what the rules previously had been that are being amended. There's no interlineations. Is that because we didn't have a regulation, in which event this is a totally new regulation, or it's something left out?
Want to speak to that?
We repealed it. There's a current part 937 and we repealed and replaced it with this. Yeah, there is some holdovers that were.
We
I don't
had,
think that was,
Commissioner.
I don't think that was clear.
Yeah, we had a previous, this part previously provided for access to regulations, access to various commission records in accordance with the former version of Section 94 and the prior commission's policies. The prior commission was not subject to FOIL. We're required by FOIL to adopt regulations for the implementation of FOIL, and we have additional mandates under the statute to provide certain information to the public on request, independently of the FOIL process. So this combines, in effect.
This is brand new in effect for us. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Megan, I didn't mean to say you weren't clear. I was just trying to say we didn't understand. Okay. All right, so do we understand now what we're voting on? Commissioner Carvalho.
So I just have a proposed change to 937.2, the information that's publicly available, subsection 1, 2, and then A. I'm just wondering why social security numbers aren't there as part of what we're going to keep. What's going to be redacted?
I don't believe they.
We don't have it on the form, the public disclosure.
Correct.
Oh, that's the reason then.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute.
Social security numbers.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
So what was the answer to your question? I heard you say thank you, but I'm not sure we could hear it here.
The answer was that we don't collect we don't ask for social security numbers on the public disclosure form, so there's no need to redact that.
Okay.
And then I
Okay.
just have one more little comment, if I might. On the logs, we have a list of what is on the log, and that's letter D, 4D on page. It's right above the 937.3 records access. I just want to add, if we can add to the list of what's in the log, the person recording the request as a letter 4, number 4. So we shall include the date of the request, the identity of the individual or entity, identify the records requested and provided. And I just want to add that the person recording the request should be on that record as well. Staff member or the. That's D, yes, section D.
Megan, are you clear on the request?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we would vote, the motion would have to be approval as amended by, approval as amended. Commissioner Groenewegen.
I had one other question. To the extent we have a section that discusses information publicly available on the website, pursuant to the recently enacted resolution on per diem and disbursements, we've provided in there that certain information is going to be made publicly available on the website. Do we think it's appropriate then to include in the list of information publicly available on the website what's reflected in the resolution?
I mean, I'm okay with that.
In what sense? Making available the law?
Yeah,
Or-
no. The
in our
resolution,
resolution,
paragraph 7 of the
we said-
resolution says the amounts paid to members pursuant to this policy shall be publicly available on the commission website. To the extent we now have a regulation speaking to what is publicly available on the commission's website, do we want to reference that provision in our resolution, which we have adopted, in the regulation? It's just a question.
So have we delineated other items that will be publicly available on the website?
The delineation really comes out of the statute, out of section 94. So we were distinguishing between those materials, records that would be available pursuant to FOIL, and those other kinds of records that were required by our statute, by section 94, either to make publicly available, notwithstanding FOIL requirements, and also those that were required by the statute to put on our website. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. I'm just asking a related question. What we have, under our guiding authorities, we have the statute, the regulations, now we have resolutions. And the question is, this is now in a resolution. What's our thinking about reflecting what this body has put in a resolution in treating it as a guiding document, not with the same force and effect of law as a statute or regulation, but something we intend to adhere to? Do we want to include it? That was all my question. If the answer is no, because it then a good argument against it could be every time we do something by resolution and decide that in the interest of transparency that's important, that would mean going back. But there could be a catch-all that says, or any other matter identified by commission resolution as being publicly available.
I think we should take a broader look at that.
Okay.
I mean, because there's nothing that prevents the commission, either on an ad hoc basis or more broadly, for making a determination that certain categories of information will be added to those that will be made available. This regulation was designed essentially to effectuate the two statutory commands, those in section 94 and those in FOIL.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, commissioners.
Question about the practicalities of this process. Since we charge 25 cents per page for photocopies, can people request like PDFs to be emailed to them? And if so, do they have to pay a fee or do they just get it?
As long as I've been records access officer, no one has specifically asked for a hard copy. So we typically respond by providing electronic copies of the documents, so we don't charge anything for them.
We don't charge anything for that. Okay, I think that's great.
Provided they have the electronic copy.
Right. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense.
There is a provision, there is a provision in FOIL that in the event of exceptional expenses, we get requests for data including some that are very substantial. And if we incur costs associated with those, the statute does permit us to pass along the cost. So if we have to have IT specialists come in and provide data in a particular format, after discussing with the requester, we could pass along those costs. But I don't think we've done that so far.
Also,
We've had
just
such requests.
I just note also that the statute gives the requester the right to choose the medium in which we respond. So if they want an electronic document, that's what we do. And if they want something else, then we'll work with them to suit their needs.
And then is there a process for someone to, like when you file things in court, you can submit an affirmation that says that you don't have the financial means to pay the fee. Do we have a process for somebody to say, I want a hard copy, I don't have a computer, and I can't afford to pay the fee? Is there a process for that?
Has that occurred? That occurred, I think, on the second day of the commission coming into existence, and we were able to work that out.
What's that mean?
It sounds like Commissioner Ayers is suggesting that we have a policy related to what I'll describe as financial hardship conditions when it comes to accessing public information. We've had an ad hoc process, Right.
if you will.
I'm going to ask
We have
staff.
not formalized it.
I'm going to ask staff to make a recommendation to us about a formal process for addressing that, and have that reflected in the minutes so that we don't lose sight of it. Okay, Commissioner Ayers.
Just one other thing, if we're correcting typos, then this has already been out for notice and comment. Is this, oh, sorry.
The final is being proposed for the first time.
Okay, so this is
We're mentioning it for the first time.
we're approving a notice of proposed reg.
Exactly.
Got it, okay, thank you. And then my only other question was,
Well, you put that added, so you could comment on it, and then we don't have, we can add it afterwards to extend the period.
Sure.
So,
I don't know how to describe this because there's not.
Okay, so we're
yeah.
going to, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Commissioner Ayers, since this is being put up for the inception of the rulemaking process, we would like to adopt these on an emergency basis now, so they will guide us going forward during the notice and comment period. But maybe it would make sense if you have language for an informa pauperis kind of procedure. Maybe we can include that now, so the initial notice of the proposed rulemaking can include that.
I'm happy to draft something, is that, but I also don't want to step on staff's role. If it'd be helpful, I'm happy to do it, but I'm also happy to not, either way.
Can it be as simple as staff will entertain or accept applications for hardship from
We can also,
requesters for documents, something like that?
sure, and we can also just check with other government agencies and see what their process is, because I know other government agencies also are subject to FOIL, and so if they have another process, we can adopt that, a similar language to that.
I think that doesn't necessarily, because that would just be an addition, a further thing.
Correct. But when to it, but it can also be a,
Megan, did we see any, look at a lot of agency, I didn't see.
Honestly, didn't really look at that one out.
Check with Shoshana.
to have the after referring to other, it's my sense is they all have the same issues, they brought to me my sense. But I really want to be different. Sure, and since we really feel over compelled to give access to the public. So it'd be nice to hear what other regulations, what other agencies do. But I would want to make sure that this agency has in place. Absolutely. Options, sure, people without technology, getting access to without sure paper. I just mentioned, what other agencies do in the sense of if they do have other, if they have similar language or something that would work for our needs, that's something that we can model ourselves after. But I understand commissioners' concerns about That's okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Groenewegen.
Well, I think I just heard, that staff can look to see what other agencies are doing.
Right.
And I would think the Committee on Open Government might be the promptest resource for that. But I think the other thing, too, we should be mindful of is, given the overarching goal of this body to be as transparent about what we're doing, I think we want the broadest accessibility possible, and looking for, do we even want to charge, is I think a first question, except, or make clear that charging is for the extraordinary circumstance, as the executive director said, where in order for the agency to respond, you have to undertake basically some programming to compile the records and something like that, something that's extraordinary, and or where we could define that. And I suspect there might be, when you look at other agencies' regs, agencies that are committed to full disclosure, having something like that.
Okay. Well, let's see what the staff comes back with, but we're understanding that when we vote on this, comes back with relative to other agencies, but when we vote on this emergency adoption, we are amending this to include a hardship provision, a financial hardship provision. Commissioner Austin.
Not to be a Grinch or anything, and I fully support the idea of those who are not able to pay getting a break. But my concern is that we all know that there are those who might game us and just apply for mountains of paper to slow us down, bog us down, annoy us, or whatever else. And I think that, the fees in some respects are kind of a gatekeeping or a sincerity measure, not that it's overly expensive, but I think we have to keep that in mind as well so that the system's not abused. I have no problem with those in need asking for what they need, but there are those, I think, who would abuse the system, and I think we have to take that into account.
Understood, and we'll anticipate that staff will come back to us if they believe that this process is somehow being exploited for nefarious reasons. Commissioner Whittingham.
It's fine. I was just saying I agree. I think perhaps Commissioner Austin's point may have been, correct me if I'm wrong, based on what Commissioner Groundswigger said. We shouldn't eliminate the cost totally, but we should have the hardship. And I think that's where we're agreeing. So is that what we're saying? Don't eliminate a fee across the board, even though we want everything to be transparent, but we should have the hardship provision. So I think we are saying, just be careful, although we want to make sure we're giving access, don't eliminate it by that hardship provision in the regs. And I believe that's what he was addressing. So I'm in agreement with that.
Understood.
Let me make a suggestion. In the Committee on Open Government's model FOIL regulations, Freedom of Information Law regulations, in their fee provision, they have a subsection 8. An agency may waive a fee in whole or in part when making copies of records available. We can add that language, or perhaps elaborate a little bit more and say in instances of financial hardship.
We need to add in cases of financial hardship.
The language is fine, and I like it.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards, were you making a point?
Yes, I'm comfortable with the language, and I'm comfortable with having special hardship. And I'm somewhat comfortable with the fee. That is an issue for me. I think we need to put those things in place. But I just want to make a point about there's issue and then there's culture. And when we say we have the discretion to, allow for hardship, et cetera, I've been down that road when public officials use their discretion inappropriately.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose is to protect information versus giving it out. And I think we ought to start thinking about the culture in which we're operating, and that has to change as well. When we give, for example, when we waive fees, it's not really giving people a break. This is their information. We need to do everything we can to provide access. So the question is, we don't want people to abuse it. We don't want millionaires asking for a break. But it's not a break, it's public dollars. And I think that we have to make sure that we instill a culture this level and with that the staff is not already there. That we're public servants and we're giving people access to information that belongs to them.
Understood. And I'm informed to date, the agency has not charged anyone for any documents that it's had to actually produce. And as I think Michael said, we don't do it when they're electronically transmitted.
Okay.
So we need to have a motion to adopt this
Chair, can I just ask one
regulation.
question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Just for clarification, should there be some mechanism in the regulation for confirming financial hardship? Or how should that decision be made?
I think it's got to be left at the discretion of the staff.
It's in that
It gets too complicated otherwise. Commissioner Ayers.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it sounds like there's a consensus here that there should be
Something is important to develop some factors.
Hold on one second, Commissioner Ayers. Just 1 second. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I was just
Go
going to
ahead,
say,
Commissioner Ayers.
Freedom of Information Act requests the federal government. I think a lot of federal agencies have a process on their website for verifying that may be useful for samples. I don't know if state departments do it because I couldn't find it with some quick Googling, but I was just going to say, I think it's also important that affirmation process, not like shouldn't have to get notarized, right? Like it should be something that you can affirm, and we should be sort of reasonable about what, if any, documentation is required. I mean, I think an affirmation should be. I'm sure that there are folks out there who think like, cool, I could use a bunch of paper for kindling, so I'm going to request the last 1,000 documents you put out, and you don't get to charge me anything. Like I think an affirmation will prevent us, and there should be a provision for if staff begin to get the feeling that it's being abused, they can raise that. But I absolutely trust the staff to come up with a good model for that. If that answers your question.
Yes, it's just, no one had mentioned it as being
Right.
the regulation, so.
Yeah.
You think it should be?
All righty. Okay, so can the chair will entertain a motion
So moved.
to adopt this? To adopt this regulation on an emergency basis with the understanding that it has been amended to include a hardship provision that will be a part of the that will be there for the public comment period, and we did one other amendment.
We included in the records access log that the staff member recording the request shall be also included in that log.
Okay. All right, so Commissioner Austin has made the motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Cardoza, seconds. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Hearing none, the ayes have it. I think it's unanimous. The motion is approved. So we are now on item 7. You received a copy. You have received now a second copy. We received one a few months ago of the expanded or staffing plan that our executive director presented to us some time ago. We're going to ask that we approve that as these hires continue and as he continues his negotiations with the budget office about these hires. We just want to take the formal step of saying that this commission has approved that plan. So let's open it up for discussion. Any questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve the expanded staffing plan?
So moved.
Commissioner Austin, second. Commissioner Cardozo, questions, comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes have it, it's approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Now on the question of our forms and submissions, we're going to move that to executive session because we have some legal issues there we need to talk through, particularly the review as opposed to approve issue. We'll move to election of chair and vice chair with the understanding that we may take that vote at the end of the discussion or we may not, but let's begin the discussion by taking a look at the memo staff has prepared it's in your inbox on your email. If you don't have it, in New York, we can get them to give you
You should have hard copies.
hard copies. I understand there are hard copies there. So I'm going to ask, right. Since this was prepared by both our executive director and our general counsel, I'm going to ask them to speak to it.
Yes, I'll take it. Very briefly, the executive law at section 94(4)B calls for the election by a majority of the commission of a chairperson from among its members for a term of 2 years. We have been operating thus far with an interim chair. It seems timely at this time to move to formalize that. The term for the chair is a period of, again, 2 years. In terms of statutory authority, I know the question has been raised. The statute's not specific about the authority of the chair beyond calling meetings of the commission, which a majority of commissioners can do as well. It is customary, and we've taken a look at a fair amount of case law. There's very little that addresses this question where the statute is nonspecific. But it's clear that the chair has the role of arranging for meetings to take place, not only calling them, but taking care of the necessary arrangements, guiding the discussion, providing the agenda in conjunction with whatever staff, in this case, staff of this agency, has with their support, and ensuring the commissioners have the information they need in order for meetings to be conducted in an orderly and meaningful way. In addition, the chair can be given whatever additional roles or responsibilities the body as a whole feels are necessary, the chair feels are necessary in order for the body to conduct its business. And we do have a resolution in place, for example, that gives the chair the authority, in consultation with the commission, to create committees. We have committees to see to not only the membership of those committees, but the staffing of those committees and support provided by staff. With respect to the office of a vice chair, the statute makes no provision one way or the other. The public officers law does have a provision that allows for the appointment of deputies, the sole function of which is to fill in effect, for the chair when the chair is unable to conduct business. I think it's exceedingly important to this commission to have a person in place in the event the chair is unavailable or is refused on a particular matter to take over presiding over meetings when that becomes necessary. There's, again, not a lot of case law on this provision, but it has been cited from time to time in cases really dealing with the distinction between a deputy under the public officers law and an employee under the civil service law. And those are interesting cases, but they really have nothing to do with our situation. Pure deputy is someone who who automatically succeeds to the office of the principal in the event the principal is unable to carry out those duties. And frankly, from a staff perspective, it's important to have that position in place so that things can move along smoothly. We know that recusals will take place from time to time, and matters will have to be discussed in terms of arranging for upcoming meetings, ensuring that the communications lines are clear with other members of the commission. And so it's my view, I think Keith shares that view, that it's appropriate for the body to have a vice chair in place.
Commissioner Groenewegen, comments, questions?
But my only, first, thank you for having this document for us today. I think that's very helpful. And thank you for noting that that this body has already expanded upon the role of the chair in very public documents, particularly with respect to committees. Going back to the very beginning, I've always questioned the need for a designated vice chair. Except I've always thought that the role would, of necessity, be limited to acting in the absence of the chair when that was necessary. So that was fine. But I noticed that we've also at different times expanded on the role of the vice chair, such as in the resolution on committees where we made both the chair and vice chair ex officio members. And so that presents a concern in my mind. And I would be, I'm always going to be in favor of a more simplified structure for the body of the commission, not the agency. I think this body should keep its functions clearly defined and not build additional structures to enhance the functions of the body. And so for that reason, I don't know that I support the continued existence of the role of a vice chair. To the extent the chair is not available, I think they're presuming, unless the chair is hit by a bus, God forbid, I think it will always be known or that the chair is not available, and there are other ways than having another existing officer of this body designated to perform that role. I think it could be assumed, but I don't know that we need that formal designation for something that I think would likely occur very rarely. And when it does arise on an ad hoc basis, I think it could be dealt with on an ad hoc basis.
Okay. So the conversation is focused on the duties and responsibilities of a chair, and then whether or not there should be a vice chair. Let's see if Commissioner Groenewegen has made her point of view clear that she doesn't think we necessarily need a formal vice chair. Let's see if there are other comments on that. Commissioner Cardozo?
I disagree with Commissioner Groenewegen. It seems to me there's certainly no downside to having a designated vice chair, even if the chair doesn't get hit by a bus, but simply has the flu or something. It seems to me we should have a procedure in place. And I also can think that from time to time, the chair may not be able to function on a particular issue. I see absolutely no downside to having that. Whether he or she can relieve the chair from time to time of other duties, I think play it by ear. But I think the system has worked out very well so far, and I see no reason to change it. And given the analysis that the staff made of the law, I don't think there's a legal problem. So I would prefer that we continue with the vice chair.
Commissioner Carney?
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree that there's no need for a vice chair, and I think that we can have somebody serve when needed on that basis from time to time. And so I do not support having a vice chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ayers?
Actually,
Okay, my question was only whether, I'm very grateful for this legal analysis, it's really helpful. Would it be, I guess it's particularly directed to the folks who wrote the memo, but for anybody, do we need a resolution, or would it be better to have a resolution, given that the earlier resolution that Commissioner Groenewegen mentioned actually references the role of chair and vice chair, sort of as if it's a thing that exists? Should we have whatever we decide, whether we decide to have a chair or a vice chair, should we have a resolution to codify that decision?
So that last part again, Commissioner Ayers, it sort of faded away.
Oh, sorry. Should we have a resolution, whatever we decide right now about chairs and vice chairs, should we have a resolution to codify that decision?
Sure, we'll make the decision and then we can come back and see what we need to clean up based on what we decide. How's that? Commissioner Edwards?
Thank you. First, I have a question. When we say the appointment of a deputy, in our case would be a vice chair, does that mean that the chair has the authority to appoint a deputy or vice chair, or that it's an elected position?
The body would typically create the position and would provide the authority or for the election of the individual. It depends where the power resides in this instance. Yeah. And I think this is a very rough assessment on my part. I think it's up to the body to make that determination.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Cardoza on with regards.
I'm sorry.
I kind of agree with Commissioner Cardoza with regard to having the vice chair work. And as a member and not officer, there's enough work involved. You know, high level. I can only imagine what the chair and the vice chair goes through with fielding all from our 7 members plus dealing with staff. And, you know, use the one parallel in getting a bus, getting hit by a bus, but you certainly want someone in place to be able to easily step in and continue the business of the chair. And I'd like the idea of having a second person in command. Number one. Number two, I don't see any downside to that. With regard to serving as ex officio members, maybe the vice chair doesn't need to be an ex officio member, but if you're going to steer this ship, the chair needs to be very clear that every committee is operating consistent with what the general body of commissioners agree. Because I know we can go off on tangents, any committee does. And as many public entities I've sat on, you always give the chair the right to be ex officio to committee members, to committees. You know, one thing you don't want to do is to have a committee to go rogue, and you find that out at the meeting. You want to have that in place moving along. So I don't solely agree with that. And again, I don't see a downside to it. Now, maybe it's overkill to have the chair and the vice chair as ex officio. I might go along with that. I definitely think the chair who leads this commission should have the right to serve as ex officio member of those bodies, of the committees.
Any more comments on the issue of a vice chair for the commission? All right, I think let's focus in on the vice chair position and let's get a sense of commission as a whole. Chair will entertain a motion to establish a position of the vice chair to stand in for the chair in the event the chair cannot carry forth the responsibilities of the position. So it's moved by Commissioner Cardoza and seconded by Commissioner Edwards. Is there any more discussion on this? All right. All those in favor of establishing a vice chair position that will be effective in the event that the chair cannot carry out the chair's responsibilities, please say aye. Okay, I see raised hands. All right. All those opposed, please say no.
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 One no here, no in, from Commissioner Carney, Syracuse. Any abstentions? All right, by my, and I vote in favor of it, so by my calculation, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 2. Okay? All righty. So now I'm going to ask if we are ready to consider a vote on chair and then who will serve as vice chair. If we're ready to do that, if there are no objections, I'm going to turn over this part for the vote on the chair to Commissioner Ayers and ask her if she will moderate this portion of meeting as it relates to chair. And then once we decide that, we'll come back and see how we moderate the piece on the vice chair. So Commissioner Ayers.
Okay, so the chair called me shortly before the meeting to ask if I would do this, and of course I said yes. Maybe because I'm the most junior member, I can't be suspected of having favorites yet. I certainly don't. Everyone is my favorite. But I suppose the first question is whether folks think we should proceed to a vote today, or I would suspect the order of operations is number 1, should we vote? Number 2, who is running? And number 3, the actual decision. So if that seems correct to everyone, then let's proceed with discussion 1. Should we vote today?
Yes.
Yes.
It's some yeses in New York.
Well, the reason why I like to say is that I can expand on my yes, is it would be nice if we had permanent serves in time for the public meeting we're having next week. Yeah, I agree with her point. I think we should do it today.
Very good point.
Yes, great.
Anyone else want to be heard on that? Yeah, I don't see any other hands. New York is, Albany is a little hard to see, but I don't see any hands. Okay, so then, all right, thank you. Then I guess question 2, who wants to put themselves forward as a candidate or put anyone else forward as a candidate? Nominations, thank you. Commissioner Cardozo.
I nominate Commissioner Davey to be the chair.
Second.
I second that.
All right, any other nominations?
Vote to close.
Yeah. Most nominations. All right, but hearing no other nominations, I believe we have the motion on the floor, and so we vote, right? Is that right? All right. All in favor of Commissioner Davey for the position of chair?
Aye.
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 The easiest vote.
Yes. All right. All opposed? Any abstentions? Appears to me the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. So, thank you. Thank you. Really, I appreciate it. Humbled by it. Hope I'm not crushed by it. But look forward to continuing to work with everybody to move this process and this commission forward and to carry out the mandate that the state legislature and others have given us to try to advance ethics in government and lobbying in the state of New York. So thank you. Yeah, I deeply appreciate it, and we've got a lot of work, ahead of us. Now I think we can move to the,
Mr. Chair, we have a question in New York.
Is there,
sure,
does this say, does the 2-year term begin today, or is it retroactive to the time he was interim chair?
that's a good question.
It would be retroactive.
Yeah, I think it'd be retroactive.
So it's a year and a half.
Yes. You have to have a regular term.
Right. So when the term comes up, it's,
If the folks in Albany can't hear,
Somebody else.
then they think it would be retroactive.
yes.
So what, I propose that we ask staff to do a pretty good analysis of that and come back to us with when this term will effectively end, when my term will end.
I agree.
Are we in agreement there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, am I relieved from my in this process, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, we should compliment the temporary chair for running this.
Right. Well, I don't think the temporary chair is done because
Okay,
I'd
I'll
like to
keep going.
move that, okay, I would like to move that we, that Commissioner Austin be vice chair and assume responsibilities in my absence.
Is there a second? I saw Commissioner Cardozo first. There were several seconds. Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair?
Close.
Hearing none. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
I see
One here.
one in Albany, right? Okay, 2 opposed, and any
In
abstentions?
Syracuse.
Great, 2. All right, so I believe that was 2 opposed, and 7 in favor, no abstentions except for Commissioner Austin, who's not voting for obvious reasons, I believe.
Actually, he can vote for himself.
I can vote for myself. So 8-2, the motion carries, or whatever carries. Carries, Commissioner Austin will be the vice chair.
yeah. And nice things up, Commissioner.
Yes. I believe that's back to you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chair Davey made the motion, Cardozo.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Ayers, we were having a little discussion here about
That's okay.
little housekeeping.
I reported that the motion appeared to carry 8-2, and that I believe I can now ask to be relieved of my duties as temporary chair.
Your request is granted. Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, and I look forward to continuing to work with Lynn and all of you to do this work. I skipped over, just inadvertently, the upcoming annual meeting, upcoming annual public hearing. So can we have comments on that?
Let me just announce publicly, again, we've discussed it many times, the commission's annual hearing as required by the executive law, section 94 of the executive law, subsection 4I, calls for an annual public hearing to address a number of issues. Those have been propounded in the notice of hearing that we put out there. The commission has invited numerous individuals and groups either to appear to testify in person, remotely, or to submit written testimony or written comments to us. The hearing will take place on March 29th at New York Law School in New York City. It's scheduled to begin, the hearing is scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. We're keeping the signups open. You can sign up online on the commission website. There are links on the notices that have gone out, and we're hoping that there will be an enthusiastic turnout for this event. Again, and we will be live in New York City. We will also have the offices here in Albany open if anyone wishes to watch the proceedings from here or to testify from here. And individuals can sign up to provide testimony remotely as well.
Right. And I think that's a great opportunity to reiterate that the public can sign up to do remote testimony. And I hope that's real clear to everyone. I think it's a really good addition to this public conversation. Commissioner Cardozo.
Can you tell us, Sandy, how many people or groups have signed up so far?
As of this morning, we're up to, I think, somewhere in the range of a few handfuls.
We still have slots available.
Yeah, we definitely have slots.
We do have slots available. If need be, we will go to 2 p.m. But we have, I would say, a nice sign up so far. And we're expecting to receive written we have received some written testimony already. You know, we're seeing an uptick, if you will, in the signups, but they're coming in.
And I would encourage us to encourage the people that we know who have an interest in this to please give their public testimony. Commissioner Vice Chair Austin.
Thank you. I'm wondering, could we see copies of the written testimony as it arrives so that we'll be prepared for the meeting?
Yes, we have FOIL regulations in place, and
Yeah, we're
Yes.
that with the information early next week.
Get them on the cuff
Great, thank you.
yes, we will make them available to all commissioners in advance of the hearing.
Thank you.
Wait. Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, for invites sent out to churches, local newspapers, and local community places.
We have not specifically, we're happy to do it. We have not specifically reached out to religious
That's correct.
institutions.
If you have ones in mind, we can
Yeah.
certainly reach out. We've sent out personal invitations now to tens of thousands of individuals because we did that this week, including the ones that have been targeted. And reporters have been invited, actually twice now. They've been invited, so they're informed as well. And the information's also on our website. So we have gotten the word out.
I would like to recommend that you come up with a list of churches. There are lots of religious institutions. There are lots of forums where you can gather that information and send out, if nothing else, an email to those sites. Also, local newspapers. I mean, again, I want to stress, people don't have a large constituency who don't have access to the internet. And you have a vast majority of people who go to churches and synagogues and read the local newspaper. I just think you need to post those reads.
Yeah.
You don't want
I
to
think
focus
the
on just
staff is,
access to networks.
I'm sorry, say that last part again, Commissioner
I
Edwards?
just don't think we want to just focus on people who have access to networks. I mean, that's a great source, but we're missing out. Like you would, right? Like networks and internet. Yeah, networks and internet. I mean, you know, the public church is a big source. It's a big database of a diversity of people, and as well as local newspapers. You know, other than the Times.
The newspapers,
Right.
the newspapers have all received it twice now.
And the electronic media.
Right. And
Yeah, all media, TV, radio, print, yes, electronic.
And I can help with identifying sort of statewide interfaith bodies that are engaged in the sort of public advocacy.
Wonderful, thank you.
And they can then push it out to their constituencies. Okay. Anything else on the public hearing?
Yes, I have a question.
Commissioner Ayers.
I'm just wondering, and I guess this is a question for the communications committee folks or for Emily or for anyone else. Just any thoughts on media requests around the hearing, and if we get requests from folks who are interested in saying, so you had a hearing, I'm interested in getting your reaction to that. It's a sort of news event, so it's possible that we'll be reached out to in that way, and I think it's I'd be grateful for any thoughts from the group on how to respond.
Media policy.
Piner. Sure. So reporters have been invited to attend, and it's a public meeting. Of course, we encourage them to attend, and the chair and executive director will be there on site. And I think we'll entertain those requests on site as they occur, or after the fact if they come in with the chair and the executive director.
Yeah, but seems like a good corner.
I would say,
I'm sorry, just to clarify, does that mean you're recommending the rest of us not speak to media? Which is fine. I'm not.
Media policy. We don't have a policy.
at the risk of, at the risk of being accused of trying to limit information to the public, I think it would be most strategically helpful if we got individual inquiries to refer them to our Director of Communications. That would be my recommendation. But clearly, any commissioner is free to talk to the press at any time.
And I think I said at the committee meeting too, I'm always happy to assist if you get a reporter inquiry. I'm happy to follow up with them, ask further information, and share it with you before deciding how to proceed. So if you ever do get a call from a reporter, I'm happy to help out.
Okay, thanks.
And this is probably a good opportunity for me formally to introduce Emily DeSantis.
Oh, I thought we did. We did
We did
last
at the
meeting?
committee meeting.
Right, okay,
We
sorry.
did it at the committee meetings,
Okay.
but this is the first formal
sorry.
commission
Okay,
meeting,
I'm sorry.
which we've had an opportunity to do this. And we are all, as you can see, exceedingly happy to have Emily with us. She has an extensive history in both in government and the private sector. In the communications role, and she has already made a mark on the agency, and we're very grateful to have her here. So thank you for being here.
Here,
Thank you so much for putting your trust in me, and I have already enjoyed my 2.5 weeks here, and all the staff and the commissioners have been wonderful, so thank you to everyone.
She has not been ignored.
Right.
This is true.
Right. Well, officially welcome.
Thank you.
And apologies for not doing it sooner. Any other, Commissioner Cardozo?
I guess I should have said this earlier. The Communications Committee had briefly discussed the public meeting, and I had also discussed this with Emily. And I think, as Fred said, well, every commissioner certainly has the right to speak to the press. To the extent that maximum, I think we should refer these inquiries to the communications director, so that we can hopefully all be on the same page. I do suggest, and that Fred or Sandy make some preliminary remarks at the beginning of the meeting, which I understand will be planned, and depending on the timing and how much time there is, if there's a need to respond to a particular question, again, one of them would either answer or upon one of us to answer. But I think really keeping a common theme is what we want to have approach.
I think it depends on the question. I think it does depend on the question. So I would absolutely consult with Emily, but I think it depends on the question. Someone asks you a simple question, you don't have to defer or say, let me speak to our press secretary first. It really depends. And so I don't want to gag all of them.
And I don't in any way want this to be perceived or discussed in any way as a gag order. It is not. And that goes against anything I've ever stood for or will ever stand for. So this is about just asking that we defer to our Director of Communications, but it's by no means at all a requirement, and I want that to be extremely clear. Commissioner Austin, Vice Chair Austin.
I had forwarded some comments that Michael had drafted with regard to the Committee on Delegation, requesting whether Emily had any thoughts on it for my announcing that at the annual meeting. So if Emily, if you could get in touch with me.
Yeah. I don't think she's seen it, so let's, and I may have a few, let's hold that in abeyance for a while, and then let's get back to it a little before we adjourn.
Thank you.
Anything else on the public hearing?
I just had one comment on the conversation on speaking to the press. I never understood a policy of limiting who can speak to the press on behalf of a body as a gag order. I've never thought of a policy that did that as a gag order. I've thought of it as a best practice to ensure that any public statement made by a person who could be perceived as speaking on behalf of the body is known to those who will have to manage any reaction to that statement. And so my understanding in every place I've ever been employed was that there were people specifically identified as authorized to speak on behalf of the body. And in this case, I would have thought that would be the executive director, the chair, and obviously the PIO. If it's appropriate for an individual member to speak, I've always thought the best practice is, at least before you do that, if you can do that, is let the PIO know in advance, and ideally the executive director in advance, so that they don't find out about the public statement and are surprised by it. So that's just, I think, a best practice and a courtesy any of us who do speak exercise, is let the people who will have to manage this know in advance if possible.
Well, that is the request, but it's not an obligation. So I would agree. The request would be for, in the first order, for any of us, myself, the executive director, or any commissioners, or any staff that get any inquiries from the media, that we would refer those to our Director of Communications. That's the request. I agree that it's a best practice. It is not an obligation. And so the commissioners maintain autonomy in how they manage that aspect of their responsibilities. Okay? Anything else? And thank you, Commissioner Groenewegen. Anything else on the public hearing? All righty. So what if, I'll make a motion that we adjourn to executive session, and then we'll take a break for lunch. Commissioner Ayers.
Just under the, looks like this is where the new business is. I just had a quick.
I'm
sort
sorry.
That's okay. I mean, just sort of a quick protocol. No, I'm rushing to lunch myself, but in terms of the protocol, I guess, for these meetings, I've noticed that we're sort of collectively referring to each other as commissioner, but to staff by their first names. And I just wanted to ask if staff would prefer to be addressed as Mr., Ms., Mix, or director by title. I just want to make sure that we're giving staff the same level of respect that they're showing us. And I'm also thinking it might be easier for folks in the public who don't recognize first names but might recognize last names to know who we're talking about. But I'm just asking for what staff's preference is, to the extent that folks have one. You don't have to answer now, you can think about it, but But I think we should do what Steph prefers on that, and I just want to invite any thoughts now or later.
Any comments?
No, definitely up to the staff. I have referred to staff by their last name in written communications, and I've referred to staff by their first name. And I've been told by staff who have referred to by their last name that I should refer to them by their first name. It all depends on what the person prefers. So I'm just like, I'm happy to do whatever staff prefers.
In the setting.
Maybe I can ask our Director of Communications if she will have a sort of informal engagement with the staff on this issue and come back to us with a recommendation. But I appreciate your raising it, Commissioner Ayers.
Thank you.
Anything else under new or other business? All right. Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105, and Executive Law, Section 94, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending litigation, and investigative and enforcement matter that is confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. Is there such a motion? Commissioner Caraballo, for a second. Commissioner Carney. Any more discussion? All those in favor of adjourning to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you and welcome back to this public session of our March 24th, 2023 meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our February 28th meeting. So I'll ask for a motion and any amendments to or changes or revisions to those minutes. So first, is there a motion to approve those minutes? And I can't see everybody, so speak up if you're making the motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, from Commissioner Austin, Vice Chair Austin, and Commissioner Edwards seconded it. Now I know there is at least one revision we need to make. I'll turn to Commissioner Carballo for that.
Thank you. So on page 10 of the meeting minutes, continuation of section 12, effectuating executive law, I am suggesting that we delete the second to last sentence and then keep the last sentence. As that one sentence was not part of the actual motion. So I am suggesting we delete, so it's the sixth line of the second full paragraph, starting with the word and deleting up till implications.
I'm going to read the sentence.
Deleting and that timesheet submitted by commissioners should be approved by both executive director and interim chair or the executive director and interim vice chair with respect to any timesheets submitted by the chair. And that's the only sentence I'm asking to be deleted. Because it doesn't read.
There's a motion on the.
It's inaccurate.
There's a motion on the floor that's been seconded, and with the suggestion that we include this amendment to the minutes. All those in favor of the motion, including the amendment to the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion's passed as amended. The chair will now ask our
Lori.
I was looking for your title.
Lori, good.
What's her title?
I believe it's analyst.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
ask ask Lori, who is our analyst, if she will read for us what I'm going to ask to be moved by one of the commissioners.
To add the sentence where the sentence just discussed was removed, to include the executive director shall review the monthly timesheets. The chair will sign off with an electronic signature after review, and if the chair, for the chair's timesheet, the vice chair will approve it. And the resolution be amended accordingly. Thank you.
Is that clear?
Let's
Everyone's clear on the motion? All right. So who will move it?
move that motion.
Mr. Carballo, second by Commissioner Edwards. Any more discussion on the amendment? On the motion, rather? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Okay, the motion's approved. All right. Executive Director Berlin, for what transpired in the executive committee meeting,
Thank you.
executive session of
Thank
the
you.
commission
Yes,
meeting.
in executive session, the commission discussed matters related to litigation and legal advice. The commission discussed personnel matters. The commission authorized steps in several investigative matters, discussed a number of other investigative matters, and discussed guidance-related matters. Thank you.
Great. Any questions, comments, remarks? Is there any other business to come before this body at the moment? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn the public meeting? Public session? Is there a second? All righty. That was Vice Chair Austin and Commissioner Cardoza. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, thank you all. The meeting's adjourned. Thanks to the staff for all of their hard work. Thanks to you, all the commissioners, and thanks to any of the public who stayed with us this late on a Friday afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.